Good afternoon, boys and girls. We left off with Rat and Mole standing in the snow. Poor Mole has a hurt leg at Mr. Badger's house. This is that picture of the scraper down here. And there's Mr. Badger's door label. And this is the bell pull, which is sort of like a doorknob or a doorbell. We've been learning about themes. Do you remember what a theme is? Well, a theme is a literary tool, and it's a broad idea that comes up many times over the course of a story. So we have been talking about the literary tools, the themes of friendship and loyalty, responsibility, and irresponsibility. And today we're going to have another theme. We're going to talk about the theme of hospitality. Hospitality is treating guests well and being a warm and welcoming and friendly host toward your guests. Hospitable person is someone who's very attentive to their friends' needs. This means they're always making sure that their friends are comfortable and have everything that they need, often anticipating ahead of time what those things might be. So we have seen hospitable animals in this story so far. Do you remember Rat? Rat has shown a lot of hospitality. He shared his boat and picnic lunch with Mole. He invites Mole into his home to spend the night after the rowing incident. He makes a nice fire and they have a cheerful meal, and Rat makes Mole feel right at home. Toad has also displayed hospitality by inviting Rat and Mole into his caravan and sharing his food and beds with them. So here are Mole and Rat at Mr. Badger's front door. They have just pulled the bell. What do you think might take place in this story? Well, let's listen and find out. Rat and Mole waited patiently for what seemed like a very long time. At last there was a noise of a bolt sliding back, and then the door opened a few inches. "Who is it?" said a rather gruff voice. "Oh, Badger," cried the rat, "it's me, Rat, and my friend Mole, and we've lost our way in the snow." "What, Ratty, my dear little man," exclaimed the Badger. "Come along in, both of you." The two animals tumbled over each other in their eagerness to get inside. The Badger, who wore a long dressing gown, carried a flat candlestick in his paw. "This is not the sort of night for small animals to be out," he said paternally, "but come into the kitchen. There's a fire there, and supper too." He shuffled on in front of them, and they followed him down a long, gloomy passage into a central hall. Once there, they could dimly see other tunnel-like passages branching off in various directions, but there were doors in the hall as well. One of these the Badger flung open, and at once they found themselves in a large, fire-lit kitchen. The floor was well-worn red brick, and on the wide hearth burnt a fire of logs. A couple of high-backed settles were facing each other on either side of the fire. Those are like high-backed benches. And in the middle of the room there stood a long table with benches on either side. There they are, sitting on a settle. The kindly Badger guided them to one of the settles and bade them remove their wet coats and boots. Then he fetched them dressing gowns and slippers. He bathed the Mole's shin with warm water and dressed the cut. When they were thoroughly warm, the Badger summoned them to the table to eat a delicious meal. As they dined, the Badger sat in his armchair at the head of the table and listened as the animals told their story. When supper was finished, the Badger said heartily, "Now then, tell us the news from your part of the world. How's old Toad going on?" "Oh, from bad to worse," said the Rat gravely. "Another smash-up." "How many has he had?" inquired the Badger gloomily. "Smashes or machines?" asked the Rat. Oh well, after all, it's the same thing with Toad. This is the seventh. Hmm. He's been in the hospital 3 times, put in the Mole. And as for the fines he's had to pay, it's simply awful to think of. Yes, and that's part of the trouble, continued the Rat. Toad's rich, we all know, but he's not a millionaire. He'll either be killed or ruined. Badger, we're his friends. Oughtn't we to do something? The Badger thought for a while. Now look here, he said at last. Of course you know I can't do anything now. His 2 friends agreed, quite understanding his point. No animal, according to the rules of animal etiquette, is ever expected to do anything heroic during the off-season of winter. Etiquette is having good manners. Remember, we've been talking about Zoom etiquette, how to behave yourself properly during Zoom meetings. Well, there's off-season etiquette as well. Very well then, continued the Badger, but when once the year has really turned, if not before, you know, and both animals nodded gravely. They knew. Well then, went on the Badger, then we'll bring Toad back to reason. You're asleep, Rat. Oh, not me, said the Rat, waking up with a jerk. He's been asleep 2 or 3 times since supper, said the Mole, laughing. He himself was feeling quite lively. Badger's house suited him and made him feel at home, whereas the Rat, who slept every night in a bedroom beside a river, naturally felt the atmosphere quite oppressive. Well, it's time we were all in bed, said the Badger, getting up and fetching flat candlesticks. Come along, you two, and I'll show you to your quarters. And take your time tomorrow morning. Breakfast at any hour that you please. He conducted the 2 animals to a long room with 2 little white beds in it. Moments later, the 2 white beds contained 1 mole and 1 rat. The 2 tired animals came down to breakfast very late the next morning. When they did emerge, they found a bright fire burning in the kitchen, the 2 young hedgehogs sitting on a bench at the table eating oatmeal. Where have you 2 youngsters come from? Said the Rat pleasantly. Lost your way in the snow? Yes, sir, said the elder of the 2 hedgehogs. Me and little Billy here. We was trying to find our way to school and we lost ourselves. At least we found Mr. Badger's back door. I understand, said the Rat, cutting himself some rashers from a side of bacon, while the Mole dropped some eggs into a saucepan. And what's the weather like outside? Oh, terrible bad, sir, said the Hedgehog. Where's Mr. Badger? Inquired the Mole. The master's gone into his study, sir, replied the Hedgehog, and he said as how he is going to be particularly busy this morning, and on no account was he to be disturbed. This explanation, of course, was thoroughly understood. The animals well knew that Badger, having eaten a hearty breakfast, had retired to his study, and once there, he had settled himself in an armchair and was being busy in the usual way at that time of year. Can you think what that means? Was he really being busy? The front door bell clanged loudly, and the Rat sent Billy, the smaller hedgehog, to see who it might be. Presently, Billy returned with the otter. Thought I should find you here, said the otter. They were all in a great state of alarm along Riverbank when you didn't return home last night, but I knew that when people were in any fix, they went to Badger. My, it was fine coming through the snow as the red sun was rising. I was about halfway when I came across a rabbit sitting on a stump. He told me that Mole had been seen in the wild wood last night. Weren't you at all, nervous? Said the Mole. Nervous? The otter showed a gleaming set of strong white teeth as he laughed. Never. Here, Mole, fry me some slices of ham. I'm frightfully hungry. So the Mole, having cut some slices of ham, set the hedgehogs to fry it and returned to his own breakfast, while the otter and the Rat chattered about the riverbank. A plate of fried ham had just been cleared and sent back for more, when the Badger entered. He greeted them all. It must be getting on for luncheon time, he remarked to the otter. You must be hungry. Indeed, replied the otter. The sight of these greedy young hedgehogs stuffing themselves makes me feel famished. Hedgehogs looked timidly up at Mr. Badger, but were too shy to say anything. Here, you two youngsters, be off home, said the Badger kindly. I'll send someone with you to show you the way. Presently the others sat down to luncheon together. The Mole found himself placed next to Mr. Badger, and so took an opportunity to tell Badger how comfortable and homelike it all felt to him. Once well underground, he said, you know exactly where you are. The Badger simply beamed at him. There's no security or peace except underground. The Mole agreed, and the Badger, in consequence, got very friendly with him. When lunch is over, he said, I'll take you round this little place of mine. After luncheon, the Badger lighted a lantern and bade the Mole follow him. Crossing the hall, they passed down one of the principal tunnels, and the wavering light of the lantern gave glimpses on either side of rooms both large and small. The Mole was staggered at the size. How on earth, Badger, he said at last, did you ever find time and strength to do all this? It's astonishing. It would be astonishing, said the Badger simply, if I had done it. But as a matter of fact, I did none of it. You see, long ago, on the spot where the wildwood stands now, there was a city of people. Here, where we are standing, they lived. They were a powerful people and great builders. But what has become of them all? Asked the Mole. Who can tell, said the Badger. People come, they stay for a while, and they go. But we remain. There were badgers here long before that same city ever came to be, and now there are badgers here again. When they got back to the kitchen, they found the rat walking up and down. The underground atmosphere was getting on his nerves. Come along, Mole, he said as soon as he caught sight of them. We must get off while it's daylight. It'll be all right, old fine fellow, said the otter. I'm coming along with you, and if there's a head that needs to be punched, you can confidently rely upon me to punch it. You needn't really fret, Ratty, said the Badger. My passages run further than you think. When you are ready to go, you shall leave by one of my shortcuts. Before long, the Badger led the way along a damp tunnel that wound and dipped for a weary distance. At last daylight began to show itself through tangled growth near the mouth of the passage. The Badger, bidding them good-bye, pushed them hurriedly through the opening and hastily made good again the creepers and brushwood that surrounded it. Creepers are like vines, and brushwood are broken branches. He's just trying to hide the opening, hide the back door of his home. So let's think about some of the questions that we could have about this passage. When does the theme of hospitality come out in today's Read Aloud? Give 2 or 3 examples. Well, Mr. Badger welcomes Rat and Mole into his home very late at night. He brings them dry, warm clothes. He bandages Mole's leg. He conducts Mole and Rat to sleep in his guest beds, and he welcomes and feeds 2 little hedgehogs that had become lost in the snow. Very hospitable animal. Whose perspective is today's Read Aloud told through? Well, we hear the thoughts and the ideas of Mole. This story is told from Mole's perspective. Describe Mr. Badger's home. It's warm. It's underground. It's a cozy home, hidden home. When you describe something, you're using adjectives. It's a welcoming home. Or, according to Rat, it's oppressive. Rat's not sure he likes the underground tunnel type home. You learned through dialogue that both Badger and Mole have underground homes. Why do you think they like living underground? Well, it's fairly secure. They won't be bothered by other people. They don't need to worry about the weather. It won't break the way a house can. What is the atmosphere of badger's underground tunnels? Well, the tunnels are dark and damp, airless tunnels, oppressive tunnels. In nature, would Mole feel at home or out of place in this environment? If Mole were not personified, would he still like Badger's home? He would feel at home. And why? Because moles in nature live underground as well. In this read aloud, you heard that Mr. Badger retired to his study and was busy in the usual way at this time of year. What do you think this means? What do animals in nature sometimes do in the wintertime? Well, animals like badgers are less active in the winter because they hibernate. So Badger is joking that he will be busy sleeping. And what are some other things that animals do to prepare for winter? They might build special homes to prepare for winter, and they certainly might gather food and store it to last for a long winter. In today's read aloud, you also heard that Rat is thoroughly ready to leave Badger's house. Why do you think that is? Well, he's afraid it will get dark. They've already been in the dark. They don't like being in the dark in the woods. He doesn't want to spend another night in the wildwood, and he doesn't like being underground because he's a water rat and it is somewhat against his nature. So far, you've heard about the riverbank and you've heard about the wildwood. How would you compare the riverbank and the wildwood? Comparing them is how they are the same and how they compare. Comparing is the same. So how are the wildwood and the riverbank the same? See if you can think of 3 ways that they're the same. And when you contrast something, you tell how something is different. So how would the wildwood and the riverbank contrast? How are they different? Compare, same, contrast, different. All right, we're going to stop for today.